Let me tell you why the Sony ZV-E1 is nearly the perfect camera. If you take the camera body of the Sony ZV-E10, the camera sensor of the Sony a7S III, and the dedicated AI processing unit from the Sony a7R5 and put it all into a single camera, you get the Sony ZV-E1. For $2,200, this camera is an absolute workhorse for content creators. It even finally has support for touchscreen control, which is great for quickly accessing settings. That's not to say there aren't any faults, but we'll get to that. Let's start off with the camera sensor. This is, for all intents and purposes, the same sensor as the $3,500 a7S III. We're getting up to a 10-bit 422 image, and for those of you unfamiliar, that means we're getting a ton of exposure latitude, letting us capture all the highlights and the shadows in the same shot. Not only that, but if you also shoot in S-Log3, you're also getting a ton of room to play around with your color grades. And this camera can natively shoot with an all-intra codec up to 4K 60 frames per second, with a firmware update coming, allowing you to shoot in 4K 120 frames per second. At the end of the day, the image quality coming out of this camera is honestly its biggest selling point. You're getting incredible looking footage that's just shy of being identical to footage that you would get from the a7S III, which to this day I still think is one of the best value video cameras out there, but now at 2/3 of the price. On top of the incredible image quality, Sony's phenomenal autofocus system is front and center with this camera. This camera has Sony's a7R5's AI-based real-time autofocus tracking system built in. That's a $3,900 camera's autofocus system built into a $2,200 camera's body. Using the AI-based tracking system, Sony allows you to use multiple different subjects that you can track, such as human, animal, insect, birds, cars and trains, airplanes, but more importantly, the human subject tracking is what I'm interested in, because not only does it do normal eye tracking, but it also is able to figure out what is the head of the subject, what is the body of the subject, so even when the subject turns around and the eyes are occluded, it knows that, hey, this is still the same subject and we're gonna stay locked onto it. Another great thing about this is that it's able to stay locked on to the subject that you want to. So even when the subject is occluded, like maybe another subject walks in front of the person that you're recording, the camera locks on to that original subject. It's hard to shake it. The image quality and autofocus performance of this camera makes it a killer choice for videography, but it even has more features on top of that to add to the experience. You might not use all of the features, but you'll be happy that they're there. For example, this camera has an internal 3-capsule microphone that allows you to isolate noise from either just in front of the camera, just behind the camera, or both. Now, I've never really relied on the internal microphones of these cameras. However, sometimes I do travel without a microphone, and it's nice that it's there. What you're listening to is audio straight out of the camera right now. It's not great, but it's pretty decent. And of course, the camera has a multi-interface hot shoe for supported accessories, as well as a 3.5mm jack for audio in and audio out. Then you've got the auto framing feature, which digitally crops and tracks your subjects, giving you the effect like as if the camera was being panned and tilted by an operator behind the camera, which for a single operator creator like myself, this is actually an amazing feature that I use all the time. Yes, of course you could always do this in post, but if you do this kind of effect a lot in your videos, this is gonna save you a ton of time. All you have to do is press a button. If you're also using an external monitor, you can get the uncropped version recorded over there while you get the auto frame crop version recorded directly to your SD card. Then you've got this feature called Framing Stabilizer, which lets you select center or manual. Where auto framing digitally crops and tracks your subject around the frame, Framing Stabilizer digitally crops and stabilizes your subject to a specific part of the frame that you choose. Say you're doing a gimbal move and you want to keep your subject absolutely dead center. With this feature, it's that much easier to achieve that effect. Speaking of stabilizing, Sony added a brand new stabilization mode, Dynamic Active Stabilization. And personally, I use in-camera stabilization a lot. What the camera is doing is it's gonna crop in about 30% using clear image zoom, where you're not losing any quality, you're still getting a 4K image, but the camera uses that extra real estate around the edges to digitally stabilize the footage on top of the hardware stabilization that you're getting. If you do a lot of these walk and talk type shots, or if you just do a lot of handheld shots in general, you're gonna be using this mode a lot. Also, automatic depth of field adjustment. This one is absolutely nuts and I love it and I want in more Sony cameras. It's only available in the intelligent auto mode, but if you are in intelligent auto mode and you have two subjects in frame, one that's further back, one that's closer to the camera, right? The camera's gonna automatically open up that depth of field so that both of the subjects are in focus. I want this feature in all cameras, and I bet you more cameras, not just Sony, are gonna include this feature. And yes, there are some beginner-oriented features like the cinematic vlog mode that you're looking at right now, which sets your camera to 24 frames per second, adds these black letter box bars, as well as lets you pick from one of the many Sony picture profiles that are built into the camera. And honestly, the footage you get out of the camera looks pretty good. I actually go way deeper into why I think Sony made this feature and who it's for in my video, 5 reasons why you should buy the Sony ZV-E1. Now let's talk about the things I don't like about this camera. There are a few of them, and one of them will be a deal breaker for some of you. To start off, it's not a pro body. And what I mean by that is there are some things we expect out of a professional camera body at this point. Things like better ports, like a full-sized HDMI port, and you only have one SD card slot. So if you're shooting one and done type of events like weddings, you don't have the peace of mind of being able to simultaneously record a backup track onto a separate SD card in case an SD card fails on you. And of course, this camera has a smaller travel-friendly design, which can be a bonus, but it also means that it has less function buttons when compared to something like the Sony a7S III. And then the elephant in the room. Overheating. Yes, it's a real thing, and Gerald Undone did a really great job testing and explaining the record times he was able to get before his Sony ZV-E1 overheated on him. And if you want a really technical and really in-depth breakdown and review of this camera, make sure to check out his video. But what that means is that if you need your camera to record for more than 30 minutes consistently every single time while still giving the maximum resolution and image quality out of it, this camera really isn't for you. For example, it's not a really good camera for wedding ceremonies, for interviews, for podcasting, or for live streaming. So based on everything I just said, how can I possibly say that this is the perfect camera? Well, the thing is, it's the perfect camera for me. Around the time this camera came out, I had a very specific problem. See, I shoot all of my YouTube videos on my Sony a7S III, but the problem is I also talk about how I shoot my videos in most of my videos. So if I need my a7S III in the video, like demonstrating it on a gimbal, what am I supposed to record myself with? I tried recording myself with my a7 III, but the issue of trying to color match between my a7S III's 10-bit 422 footage to my a7 III's 8-bit 420 footage, it was just a nightmare. Like, it just didn't look right. So I started shopping around and I was looking at different options. I looked at the FX3 to upgrade my main camera, but then I was like, then I'd be dropping $3,900. Then I was like, okay, maybe I'll just get a second a7S III, but then I'm still looking at $3,500 for what would eventually just be 20% of the footage I shoot for my YouTube videos, so it just didn't seem like it made sense. But then Sony dropped the ZV-E1, the same color, the same sensor, even better autofocus performance, and all at the price of $2,200. It's as if this camera was literally made for me. Now, obviously, all the footage you've seen in today's video was shot on the Sony ZV-E1, and that's because I'm reviewing it, but my past 5 videos on this channel have been mostly shot on the ZV-E1. Mainly just because it's the same camera sensor as the a7S III, and it's a smaller form factor, so it's easier to bring with me, and the auto framing feature is just absolutely fun. Outside of my client work, I genuinely wouldn't mind shooting all of my YouTube content, all of my short form content, and capturing all of my memories on this camera. It's literally a 0-calorie version of my a7S III. But obviously, that's just me. Who would I recommend this camera for? Well, first of all, I wouldn't recommend this camera for anybody that has to shoot long form shots, because if you need to shoot over 30 minutes, it's just not gonna work for you. Oh, that's a wasp. Oh, please. Oh my God, why do I come film outside? But for anybody else, I'd recommend this camera to, especially if you shoot primarily on an FX3 or an a7S III. This is your perfect companion camera. I know this camera has been kind of controversial and everyone really just loves to hate on it, but I genuinely love this camera. And of course, if you're interested in checking out the Sony ZV-E1, links will be in the description down below. What do you think of the Sony ZV-E1? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Is this a camera that you want? And if you have any other questions that I haven't answered in this video, leave it down below in the comments section. Let's have a conversation. And of course, if you want to support the channel, go ahead and leave a like and get subscribed. We're almost at 50K. Thank you guys so much for the love and support. All right, that's it for this video. As always, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.